You are not weak because you fail. You fail because something in you is still trying to survive. Now stay with me, because what I'm about to say may change how you see yourself forever. For years, you've been told to kill the weak version of yourself, to crush it, silence it, outwork it, hate it into submission. What we often call weakness is not a defect in who you are, but an intelligent adaptation to what you lived through. At some point, your nervous system learned that certain emotions, needs, or expressions were not safe. Maybe being loud led to rejection. Maybe speaking up led to punishment. Maybe slowing down meant being overlooked. So your system adjusted. It learned to stay quiet, to hesitate, to overthink, to please, to disappear, or to numb itself. These responses were not choices made from comfort. They were strategies built in moments when you needed protection more than authenticity. The body and mind always choose survival over truth when the environment feels threatening. When you judge these patterns as flaws, you miss their original purpose. Procrastination can be a form of freeze. Perfectionism can be a way to avoid criticism. People-pleasing can be an attempt to secure connection. Even self-doubt can serve as a brake, preventing you from taking risks that once felt dangerous. These patterns persist not because you are incapable of change, but because the system that learned them has not yet been shown that the danger has passed. Growth does not begin with force or self-attack, but with understanding how deeply loyal these behaviors have been to your survival. When you see that clearly, shame loosens, resistance softens, and the possibility of change becomes real. Many people believe that harshness is what drives change, that if they criticize themselves enough, discipline will follow. But the nervous system does not interpret self-attack as motivation, it experiences it as threat. When you speak to yourself with contempt, your body tightens, your breath shortens, and your defenses rise. In that state, learning, creativity, and growth shut down. You may comply for a while through fear, but fear never leads to lasting transformation. It only creates cycles of effort and collapse. Self-attack often disguises itself as responsibility. It sounds like, I'm just being honest with myself, or I need to be tougher. Yet this inner violence usually mirrors voices you absorbed long before you had the power to question them. You internalized criticism because connection depended on it, because approval felt conditional, or because softness was not allowed. Repeating that tone now does not make you stronger. It keeps you trapped in the same survival loop. Healing requires a different posture. It begins when curiosity replaces judgment and presence replaces pressure. When you meet your habits with understanding rather than force, your system feels safe enough to change. Compassion is not indulgence, it is regulation. And regulated systems can adapt, learn, and move forward in ways that fear never allows. The past does not stay in memory alone. It imprints itself into the body, shaping how you breathe, how you react, and how you move through the world. Long after the events are over, the body continues to respond as if they are still happening. A tight chest before speaking, a sudden urge to withdraw, a constant state of alertness. These are not random habits, but echoes of earlier experiences stored in the nervous system. The body learned what words could not yet explain. When something overwhelming happens and there is no space to process it, the experience is not released, it is held. Muscles contract, breath patterns shift, hormones recalibrate. Over time, these adaptations become familiar, even invisible. You may call it anxiety, laziness, or lack of confidence, without realizing that your body is still trying to protect you from a danger that once felt real. The body does not measure time the way the mind does. It responds to cues, not calendars. This is why insight alone is often not enough. You can understand your history clearly and still feel stuck in the same reactions. Change requires helping the body recognize safety in the present. When the body feels safe, it no longer needs to replay the past. It can soften its grip, release old tension, and allow new responses to emerge naturally. Much of what you believe about yourself is not who you are, but a story you learn to tell in order to make sense of pain. When experiences overwhelm us, especially early in life, the mind creates meaning quickly. It draws conclusions like, I'm not enough, something is wrong with me, or I have to stay small to stay safe. These stories help organize chaos, but over time they harden into identity. You stop seeing them as interpretations and begin living as if they are facts. The tragedy is that people often try to destroy themselves in an effort to escape these stories. They push harder, judge more cruelly, and demand change through force. But the self is not the problem. The self has been living inside a narrow narrative for too long. When you attack yourself, you reinforce the very story you are trying to escape, the belief that you are fundamentally flawed and must be fixed. Freedom comes from questioning the narrative, not punishing the person. When you gently examine where the story came from, you begin to see its limits. It loses its authority when it is understood as a response to circumstances, not a definition of worth. As the story loosens, the self no longer needs to be defended or fought against, and new ways of being quietly become possible. Real strength does not begin with answers. It begins with the willingness to ask difficult questions and stay present with what arises. Honest self-inquiry requires turning toward your inner experience without rushing to judge or fix it. This is not passive or weak. It takes courage to sit with discomfort, to notice fear, resentment, or sadness without immediately trying to escape them. Many people mistake avoidance for resilience, but avoiding the truth only keeps old patterns in place. When you inquire honestly, you stop asking how to become someone else and start wondering how you became who you are. You begin to notice the conditions that shaped your reactions, the moments when you learned to silence yourself, tense your body, or override your needs. This kind of inquiry is not about blame, either toward others or toward yourself. It is about clarity. Clarity dissolves confusion, and confusion is what keeps behavior unconscious. As awareness grows, choice becomes possible. You can see the impulse before it turns into action. You can feel the contraction before it hardens into habit. This space between sensation and response is where strength lies, not in control, not in domination, but in the capacity to respond rather than react, grounded in understanding rather than fear. Toughness is often praised as the ability to endure without feeling, to push through pain by shutting down parts of yourself. It can look impressive from the outside, but it comes at a cost. When emotions are suppressed in the name of strength, they do not disappear, they go underground. The body carries the weight, the mind becomes rigid, and relationships lose depth. What is called toughness is often a form of armor, built to protect against vulnerability that once felt unsafe. Wholeness, by contrast, does not require suppression. It allows room for fear, grief, anger, and joy without being overwhelmed by them. A whole person can feel deeply and still act clearly. This kind of strength is flexible, not brittle. It bends without breaking because it does not depend on denial. When you are whole, you no longer need to prove anything by suffering in silence or by constantly pushing beyond your limits. Wholeness integrates rather than excludes. It brings together thought and feeling, body and mind, past and present. From that integration comes stability. Decisions are not driven by the need to appear strong, but by an internal sense of alignment. In this state, resilience arises naturally, not from force, but from coherence within the self. So, yes, kill the weak version of yourself, but do it gently, do it consciously, do it by outgrowing it, not hating it. And when you rise, you won't rise hardened. You'll rise whole. That is real power.